Message. Caution.
Okay, good morning. What time is it? Doesn't really matter. About 9:30 a.m. Temperature outside, 34 degrees. Actually kind of warm for this time of year. Probably the first thing, if you're a regular rider, that you've noticed is that I'm not pointing down the taxiway. Reason for that is it's a kind of gusty day, probably 13 knots or so out of the west. That kind of funnels through, becomes kind of a wind tunnel, and coming through between the hangars. And I never like to park the airplane with a wind behind it, because as it shifts around, it'll take that rudder and just slap it from one side to the other. Typically, that's pretty really gives it a whack. So when I got the wind coming through here from the west, I kind of park off to the side as I'm getting ready and doing the pre-flight. So it pushes the rudder off to one side and leaves it there. So working through the checklist, fuel check, minimum 4 gallons. We got 15 plus. Fuel valve open, should be. Don't know why anybody close that. Passenger briefing, that's you guys. Nobody cares. Seat belt, fastened and snug. And snug it is. Canopy latched in open or closed. It's latched closed today because it's obviously not hot today. On a hot day, I would do that middle latch, and so it would still be latched, but it would be latched open until I got down to the end of the runway. Throttle full back, ignition both on, bang, bang. Nav strobe on, boink. Transponder, make sure it's 1200. We don't know that yet because I might have to reorder my checklist because we have not yet turned on the avionics and autopilot. That step comes later. I think I might move those up top and just go ahead and turn those on. There's no reason to have them off. And that will allow me to check the transponder. Still at 1200 because other people fly this airplane now. It's not always going to be the way I left it. And they'll probably be doing flight following and such forth. They're going to start traveling a little bit, so that's a good thing to check. So engine start. Do not start the engine with outside air temperature below 25 degrees Celsius, minus 13 Fahrenheit. We have that, and frankly, I say it all the time, I would not be out here if it was negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit. Got better things to do at home. Caution, limit the use of the starter to 10 seconds duration maximum with a 2-minute cooling off period between each starter engagement. Fuel pressure check normal. 3.1, that's good. Normal enough for me. Cold start, which it most certainly is. Throttle closed. Choke, pull, and turn knob. It's not very instructive. You really have to have been taught how to do it. Brakes hold. Propeller clear. Not a soul out here. Oil pressure gauge monitor. I put that on this page because now we're going to engage the starter, and by the time you turn the page and then say, oh, you need to check 12 psi within 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 10 seconds, you're already burning up the engine. So the checklist is written to say, pay attention to the oil pressure as you're starting the engine, and then turn the page and do your 10 seconds. Now, starting the engine will turn off this camera, so I'm going to turn it off proactively and turn it back on again once I get the engine started, assuming I can. Okay, well, that was easy enough. Started on the first crank. Got to get that RPM back down. I'm looking at the oil pressure, and bam, it came right on up. So no worries there. Let's get that back down to 2,500 or below. I still have the choke in. So it is cold, and I have something in here about this. If it's cold enough, you have to kind of ease the choke in, because as it comes off, you may lose the engine. It may stall. So you just kind of feed it in and give the engine a chance to kind of adjust to its new normal, which is, I'm still a little bit cold, but I'm not dead. Let's see. So choke closed. We've done that. Set to 1,825 RPM. I'm going to give it right up against 2,500. It's going to take a while to heat up the oil, and frankly, it's cold in here. Ammeter may be showing 0 or negative charging, which it is not. It's actually charging at 2 or 3, which is pretty good. Sometimes when you may, I got to hold this stick. It's bouncing around. If you have the idle down low when you first start, your amps and volts may drop below positive. You can get them down. I've seen them down to -6 if I've got all the lights on and everything. Today it's working pretty well, but I think I can get it down there. Well, in any event, it's not uncommon for me to see -1, -2 when I first start the engine at low RPM. So what I do in that case is I just run it up a little bit and make sure it climbs. Make sure it's responding to having more RPM, driving more electricity. So there's 3 amps right there. So it did climb. Same thing with the voltage. Won't always be able to get the voltage up into the green, but I can, down at the end of the runway, when I run up the engine, if it climbs up into the green, everything is good. So we got avionics on, master on, or autopilot on. I'm going to move that up higher. That's in the wrong spot. So the next thing is to check the gauges and brakes release as we're taxiing. We're not ready to do that. So let's go ahead and get our, whoops, iPad thinks it's upside down. We're going to have to do aerobatics to fix that. If we can get that to straighten itself out. Come on, buddy. Come on, don't be a fool. You're playing the fool. 4 flight, I left in an awkward position. I'm going to get this. Oh, doggone it. Come on. Usually you got to twist it around a little bit until it kind of figures out what's up and what's down. There it goes. All right. Goofy thing. And then I got to snap this back in here like this. All right. This is me awkward today. I'm awkward today. Okay, so let's get through this again. And here we are. All right. So I'm going to put in a flight plan. And it's just going to be KTZR space to K ugly young farmers space. Now, I think, can I do a procedure or do I have to go to the airport? Yes, I'm going to do, okay, so what I'm simulating in this flight today is either marginal VFR or probably more appropriately, because I tend not to fly in marginal VFR, night. And I haven't flown night. I have been night current in, 3 airplanes ago. So, 15 years. Never liked flying at night, but I am going to have to get comfortable with it. It's just, you just never know. Particularly this time of year where it gets dark so early, you just don't know. So I've set myself a goal to get a little more comfortable with night flying. And I'm going to do that by leveraging the autopilot quite heavily. Now, one thing I do have to check now, I have to check that the autopilot is actually set up with the complex, the expert controls, because one of the guys that flies is currently using the simplified controls, and it kind of messes up how the advanced, the expert controls work. So I definitely have to have those. I'll be very heavy on the autopilot for this flight. So what I'm going to do is go into my 4 flight, and you probably can't see any of this. They have now traffic pattern entries. I think it came with one of the latest updates. So I'm going to go traffic pattern. It's going to tell me which way the wind, if it doesn't know the wind yet. Probably hadn't gotten it from here yet, but I know it's going to be runway 27 because it's it's 15 gusting something or 13 gusting something. So I'm going to tell it I want runway 27. And it's going to give me a couple choices. I can cross midfield or I can go direct. I'm going to cross, you're going to cross midfield either way. It's always going to take me to the other side of the runway to bring me in for a left traffic. I'm going to use the teardrop because I'm going to come over the runway, probably 500 AGL above pattern altitude. So that's going to do that. Now that gives me this little awkward, kind of where it's crossing the departure end or the arrival end, which I don't really like. So I'm going to add this to the route. Now that's going to be drawn in here, if we can get out far enough. There it is, it's drawn in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to grab this little guy right here. He'll let me. Come on. And I'm going to move it up here so I get a nice parallel on the upwind leg, parallel to the runway. So I'm just going to drop that in there. And we'll call that done. Oh no, I guess I have to say accept. I have to accept it because that might have been a mistake. So I want to insert into route that. There we go. So now we're going to come up here, then we'll make a straight kind of parallel to the runway upwind leg. We'll cross over at 500. I'll be managing the altitude. The autopilot will be managing the lateral stuff, right? So I'll have it as 500 feet above, which is, I think, pattern altitude there, I think is 2100. We'll look it up. So that put me at 2600. Going to cross over above the traffic pattern by at least 500 feet. Then I'll have the autopilot descend us down to pattern altitude as it's doing the teardrop. And then that's going to put us on a direct. It's going to give us all our wind correction and everything. So it's going to give us a direct, because I'll be using track mode. And by that, then I will take over and steer with the track knob and start managing my altitude down. Now it looks like it's going to do a nice square left base. It really doesn't. It does kind of a semicircle. And I'll drop another 500 AGL there, so that we should roll out on final at about 500 AGL, about a mile from the runway. So we'll see how that goes. I don't need to see this anymore, but I do actually need to do anything. I tell it to send it to the panel, boink, and that should tell me flight plan received from Wi-Fi source. So thank you for that, and we can get rid of that. And now we can zoom this out. And let's do it. Missing the first leg. Did I have a KTZR in there? Should have. Let's see what our flight plan looks like. KTZR to blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it seems to want to skip the KTZR part. That's kind of weird. No, that's not how you do it. Ah, darn it. It's skipping the KTZR part. Oh, no, I've got it now. That's how you do it. Okay. That throttle's creeping up. Somebody loosen this up. One of my fellow pilots loosen this up. That's what's happening. The springs are pulling it forward. Okay, so it's I can tell you it's a major adjustment to fly an airplane that I'm used to flying entirely by myself. It's a bit of an adjustment, to be fair. I'm not complaining. Love those guys, but something to be aware of. So we should be able to look at this now. Let's go. There it is. It's going to take us over to UIF. There's our teardrop. Yada yada yada. Okay. So we want to kind of pre-plan our altitudes. I'm going to climb to about 3,500, I suppose. I could stay 3,000. It doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and check that traffic pattern altitude. We should never go by memory. Well, you can. I can't. So let's go ahead and check the memory. Airport, 2,100 feet. So I'm going to cross over at 2,600, descend to 2,100 in this portion of the flight. And when I get a beam the numbers, probably drop it down another 500 foot per minute. And I will manage it. I'll manage how fast all that happens with the vertical speed knob. I don't have a vertical speed knob up here, which is unfortunate. But I'll manage it with this to make sure I'm where I want to be, where I want to be. So maybe we have weather somewhere. I'll get it from the tower, of course, but I'd like to get the altimeter set. We may have that by now. We don't, so I'll have to get that from the tower. There's no other way to get it at Bolton. There's no AWAS, there's no ATIS, there's nothing. You got to wait till the tower gives it to you, which is I call minor frustration. What are you gonna do? It's the way it is. What it is. Okay, so what do we got on the oil? Well, let's see. Now we got the oil up to 131. So what I did this morning, because it is fairly cold, I took some aluminum tape, not duct tape, actual aluminum tape, and I put covered up about 1 inch across the top of the oil cooler radiator up front, and that lets me get the oil temperature up and keep it there. Sometimes I actually do that with the radiator because that cools the cylinder heads. The radiator is also, we don't have a cuff for a heater, an exhaust cuff. We get the heat off the radiator, and when it's cold like this, you don't get a lot. So sometimes I'll cover up the radiator. It's 37 degrees. That's actually still a little bit too warm to do that. When it gets down below freezing, I'll cover up part of the radiator. It's hard to do. You got to reach way up in there. It's like trying to get a breeched calf out of a cow. But yeah, some people find that kind of thing entertaining, I suppose. So off we go. Okay, so altimeter 2981 says 960 feet, so I think that's a little bit obsolete, but that's the number they gave me, and it's not critically important. So let's get our run up done here. So I do check as I taxi. I do this, you know, it's the check gauges thing. I make sure it's turning. The only thing that can really go wrong is like I don't get my turn indicator when I turn, which would mean everything is bad. I mean, this is all kind of electronics. Hard to say that, you know, something could get bad, but there it is. So we got our before takeoff brakes hold, good idea. Flight controls free and correct, yep. And I can turn around and see the tail, and I can see the rudder if I stretch. Heading track bug, set to runway heading, 220, there it is. That's because just after takeoff, maybe a 400 or 500 AGL, I'm going to engage track mode. I'm going to get on the autopilot because it's dark, it's hazy or whatever. I'm going to get on the autopilot, and then I'm going to get my altitude set. I set this ahead of time. Sometimes it stays there, sometimes it doesn't. It's like on a timer or something, I don't know, but that could just be me. So I've got that set for 3,500. I'm going to use indicated airspeed, and I don't think I can set that yet. Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't let me do that yet. Oh, there it is. I'm going to want to climb at about, let's put it about 75 initially, but we'll lower that because that's actually a really healthy climb. Let's get that back on vertical speed, so in case we need it later. Actually, let's not, because I have had this I feel like sometimes that information I put in ahead of time just disappears by the time I need it. So I'm going to go indicated airspeed for my climb. The idea behind that is the autopilot won't fly me into a stall, although presumably it could fly me into a descent. But with this airplane, there's so much excess lift, it's just a habit I got into Civil Air Patrol. So fuel valve, check open, it's still there. Trim is set for takeoff, yes it is. Flaps are set for takeoff, which is up in this case. Canopy is latched, yes it is. Engine run up, 122 degrees, we've got that in spades. Actually, oil might get a little hot. Might have too much tape on there. We'll see, 4,000 RPM. Or thereabouts. And now the amps came back up. The amps were sitting at negative because they have all the lights on. The amps have come back up. So the ammeter's working, the volts are working, that's all good. We're kind of double checking that. And here's our 4,000-ish. It's hard to get it precise, doesn't have to be. Just gonna do a little math on whatever happens there. Okay, so we dropped, 4,010, we dropped about 40 or 50, and well, it's up to way up to 40, 70. Now it's creeping in again. There we go, and they're good. You can tell by the feel of the wind is really kicking the ailerons around. Okay, those are both good. And this just keeps creeping in. Okay, so we've got that done. Max allowable difference, 115 RPM. That was easily done. Allowed for 300 on each one. Didn't even get close to that. Engine instrument check for yellow or red. Everything is not yellow or red. Ammeter check positive. Yes, it is. Throttle idle. Now, fuses check. There's no lights. That's about the best way to tell, other than something simply not working. Little red light comes on when the fuse blows. Fuel pressure, 2.2 minimum. It's at 5.3. That's way above minimum. Seatbelts are still fastened. Lighting light is on pulse. I've got that on pulse because it's daytime. Flight timer start, don't care. Passenger brief egress plan, okay, takeoff. Press and hold reset when lined up on the runway because it says 220 doesn't mean it's exactly 220, but it's pretty close. But I can actually just press this in and it'll set to what my current track is and just keep it when I engage the autopilot. I don't always remember to do it, which is why I set it on the ground. Stick for left. Okay, well, it's your normal takeoff. Okay. So, I think we are ready to go. We got to get over here to tower. We got the autopilot. We still have our 3500. We still have our 75 knots. So we should just need to turn that on. Okay, I believe we're ready to go. Camera's running. Okay, let's creep on up here a little bit. So we're ready to go. Pretend it's Don Scott where you get like 3 seconds to, once you get your clearance to be in the airport because it's a very, very busy airport at times. Alrighty. So, here we go. Hold tower, experimental 284 Delta Golf, ready for takeoff, runway 22, departing VFR westbound.
Experimental 284 Delta Golf, Bolton Tower, runway 22, turn right on course, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 22 with a right turn on course for Delta Golf. It looks like a bit of a crosswind, not straight down the runway, so this can be interesting. Could be okay, but it could be interesting. Okay, we got to stick all the way back. We're going to let it roll straight a little bit because we got plenty of runway and we want to start out on a good foot. And we're going to ease this in, ease it in, ease it in. There we go. Stick nose comes up almost right away because of the tremendous wind. And we're going to angle into that. So we take off. There we go. We're right into our crosswind. So we're pretty much ready to turn on the autopilot when we hit about 1400 MSL. It's a bit choppy. You might have noticed. And the closer I can get to 75 knots, the better. It's less for the autopilot to do. I'm going to reset that track because it's going to be way off of 220. And I'm going to tell I want the autopilot on. And it's got my vertical speed at 600, and I want it to follow the track. There we go. Now we're going to pull back the throttle because we don't need all that. And it's climbing like a bat out of hell. So it's going to have trouble with the 75 knots. I'm actually just going to go to vertical speed because it's going to struggle with that. So we want to go altitude 3500 up and vertical speed. There we go. It's really going to struggle at 75. Now what I can do is go ahead and increase that airspeed. Let's go ahead and make that 85. And then go over to indicated airspeed mode right there. There we go. And it shuts itself to 92 knots because that's what it's at right now. So I'm going to turn that back down to where I want it, 85. There we go. So reading this, it's tracking 230, so we got 10 degree correction. It's aiming for an indicated airspeed of 85 knots to the selected altitude, which is 3,500. Now, I'm going to go ahead and track us back towards the course so that we can take a very gentle intercept on it and not go flying back into it like your life depends on it. The Skyview, I mean, I have a maximum angle set. It's really nice for VFR. It's about 30 degrees. That could be a little disconcerting at night or in the haze, so you want to do things kind of gently. Or use the autopilot, but I don't need to go jamming back to that nav course right away. So I'm going to take kind of a gentle intercept on that. Now once I'm pointing at it, at a certain distance, I could go ahead and say nav, and it would hold this track. I think I'm close enough where it would say, close enough, I'm going to yank you on over there. So for now, well, let's go ahead. We're ready for it now, so let's go ahead and say nav. And it's, okay, we were far enough away. It's saying it's going to follow track 335, which is what I set, to intercept the GPS course. So it's going to take, and I could actually change that. If I want to go a little quicker or a little less quick back on course, I could change that with the track knob. So what we have right now is we're going to track 335 to the GPS course at an indicated airspeed of 85 until we get to 3,500. That's all there is to it. At some point, we're going to want to start listening to Madison County, so we're going to go to map, info, We're still at KTZR, so we need, easiest probably thing is to go down to recent. There's KUIF. Then we're going to come on across. There's 2,100 feet, and COM is 123.0, but we can go to the COM tab. And what we want first is AWAS, not the Unicom. So we're going to go ahead and tune COM, which will put the AWAS over here, and I'll pop into that once we're out of Bolton's airspace, which is actually right about now because they have a little notch here for an airport that no longer exists. That was right there. So we'll go over to the AWAS once we're officially outside of his airspace. We could ask for a frequency change, but it's automatic once I cross that line, so I don't need to ask. Let him get back to his nap. So let's bring that in, and then let's go back to info, and let's go ahead and get that Unicom in. We'll have that ready for when we're ready to use it. So our comms are all set. We're turning on course. Just got to manage the throttle. We're just about 3,500. So this is where I want to get back to, well, the throttle's going to pick up. The RPMs are going to pick up once it levels off and it unloads the prop. So we'll set our cruising RPM here in a second. So we can see that we're tracking along here now. And we can follow along on this. So we're at 3,500. It's night and it's hazy. Now I could go down to 3,000 legally because that's below the 3,000 AGL. That has you at the 500 numbers, 35, 45, 55. I could do that. But I don't know that I wouldn't find IFR traffic down at 3,000. They use the even numbers, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. I don't know that I wouldn't find IFR traffic down there. And on a hazy or night, there could be IFR traffic. Now, they would be talking to Columbus Approach, and we would show up on radar. So I don't know if that's a thing or not. For now, we'll keep it at 35 because why not? It's more altitude if I need it in the case of an engine out or something like that. So at this point, we are just cruising along, and I don't think there's any reason to leave the camera running for now. I guess I should provide some updates for regular viewers, if there are any. Probably all of you know this, but now when I used to say buy my book, now it's buy my books, because now there's two of them. I finished the Schmetterling Aviation book. It's up on Amazon. If I think about it, I'll put a link in the show notes or whatever they call that on the YouTubes, so you can go take a look at it. I need to explain it a little bit, what it is and what it isn't. It's not a how-to guide. The how-to guide, the One True Way, is provided by Van's Aircraft with the build manual. So I have no intention at all of telling you how to build an RV-12. What I was trying to get at is what it's like to build an RV-12, whether I guess my target audience or market or whatever you want to call it would be me 10 years ago when I wanted to build an airplane. I had always wanted to build an airplane, but there's always, well, I shouldn't say for everybody, in my case only, there's always a little bit of self-doubt on things like that. Whether I'm capable, whether I have the patience, whether I have the money. A lot of questions in my mind back then that I struggled to get decent answers to. That's the person I wrote the book for. The book is 143,000 words long. About 120,000 of those are things that I screwed up or forgot or lost or whatever. And the analogy I use is anybody writing a book about climbing Mount Everest doesn't tell you where they parked in the parking lot. It doesn't tell you where they bought, well, they might tell you where they bought their provisions, but if it was Walmart, it's not that much of a story. There's no story there. Everybody does that. So when it came to picking about what to write about in the book, a lot of it came down to just the things that were difficult. If they're easy, well, they felt easy to me, which I guess isn't fair to assume everybody would find them easy, but if they were easy, routine things, or things that I learned about in Chapter 5 that were still applicable in Chapter 9, I didn't need to mention again in Chapter 9. So it does come off as kind of a buffoon building an airplane. That was not the intent, but is the story that needed to be told. I don't want to gild the lily. I don't want to make it sound like anybody can build an airplane. Because it's not true. But more people that believe they can build an airplane, or more people that believe they couldn't build an airplane, can build an airplane. And I'm giving something away here. You know, I'll give this away for free. It's in the book. You should have to pay for it. No, what I say early in the book is that the aptitudes you need to build an airplane are not mechanical. They're not mastery of tools. They're not even a deep understanding of tools. You're going to learn that. The Federal Aviation Administration allows you to build an airplane for recreation and education. So you're expected to learn along the way. So the advice I give is, if you're a person wanting an RV-12, but it kind of sucks that you have to build it, buy one already built, because you're not going to finish the build, or at least not enjoy it at all. If you're the kind of person, the person I was, that wanted to build an airplane, and an RV-12 looked like a pretty good airplane to own, then you want to build. So what it boils down to, with regards to personality traits, or I guess you could call them skills, is two things. It comes down to patience and tenacity. You've got to, if you're not going to stick at it, if you can't work your way through the hard parts, if you get frustrated to the point where you can't stand it anymore, you're going to have to punch through those. You're just going to have to work through those. You just have to deal with it. You just have to know that that's going to happen and adapt to it. So that's my view of it. So the book is basically intended to be the experience of writing a book, building an airplane. So with that in mind, if that's the kind of thing you find interesting, buy the book. Anyway, we are now 16 miles out, so 4 miles to airport, so we need to start our descent. We're going to go down. I think I said pattern altitude was 2100. We're going to go to 2600, so let's dial that in. I could have had that dialed in already. There's no rush. I mean, I could do it well ahead of time. And I'm going to turn us down there. We got 4 minutes to go, and we're losing 900 feet, so 300 foot per minute would be more than enough. So let's go. We don't want indicated airspeed anymore. We want vertical speed. And let's dial that down to, well, up, however you want to look at it, to about 300 foot per minute. And let's not let ourselves get going super fast either. We're going to be entering the pattern at about 90, or we want to be at about 90. So we're just not going to let it pick up a whole bunch of steam on the way down to our 2600. Now that little blue bar, which you probably can't see, what that's showing me is I'm going to reach that not pattern altitude, but the altitude I've targeted just before we make that turn into the midfield crosswind. So that's a very handy thing. That lets me adjust through either airspeed or vertical speed, so that I don't end up still way too high and descending over the airport or whatever. So now it's getting closer and closer to us as we get down to 90 knots. And actually I could do that with indicated airspeed. I've never done a descent with indicated airspeed, but there's no reason I couldn't. But I can either roll in a little bit more throttle, which I don't want to do, or I can take out some of the vertical speed and put it down at 200 foot per minute and see how that adjusts. Now you go in 100 foot per minute increments, so you can't really fine tune it. Doesn't really need to be fine tuned. That really hasn't had the effect I want. So, well, I could wait a little longer, but just for the sake of argument, let's make that 100 feet per minute and see where that pushes that little blue line. Now I am 3 miles out, so I'm going to make a radio call. Madison County traffic, experimental 284 Delta Golf is 3.5 miles east, inbound for a midfield left crosswind, runway 27, Madison County. And the fact that I'll be 500 above, not really pertinent. Now this is getting back out where I don't want it, although we're also getting a little bit slower than I want. So let's put a little throttle in there. And we're going to have to go back. If I put in the throttle, I'm going to have to take this back down at least minus 200. And I might as well go minus 300 because I got the airport in sight, although in my scenario, I would not have the airport in sight. 3 miles. We could probably see the lights at this point if it was 3 miles visibility. At night, we would definitely be able to see the lights. It's a strange quirk that rural airports are easier to see at night than city airports because they're not surrounded by other lights. That green and white beacon it's so weak. I think got like a 50-watt light bulb in there. It's really hard to see. But I would turn on the runway lights, and that would help a lot, especially the approach end lights. Those lights right across the end of the approach, you'd be able to find those. So we're trying to keep it as realistic. Now we got our airspeed up high again. We're at 97. So this is really a lot of airspeed management. I'm going to zoom in on this, get a little bit better picture of what's going on. Don't want that close there. That's about right. So it should tell me in just a few seconds or so. It's going to give me the 30-second countdown for that midfield crosswind to make that turn. And I'm not getting much heat in here at all. It's a wee bit chilly right now. All right. And I don't see anybody around, so.
Delta County traffic, that's now 53, 10 miles.
I can be a little judicious on my calls. It's not too many people around.
Runway 27, Fulton.
Fulton, okay. It was runway 27, kind of caught my eye, or ear. All right, turn that back off. Okay, so should get a countdown here soon. 1.5 minutes, or 1.5 miles to the waypoint. We're battling a tremendous wind. So I've got 90 on the airspeed indicator, and we're doing 59. So things are going to take a little bit longer going upwind. Things are going to happen very quickly downwind. Be quite interesting to see how well the autopilot handles that crosswind as it tries to follow this, the ground track. That should be instructive. Could be amusing. But that's the beauty of flying ground track. It doesn't, the autopilot and avionics, they figure all that out for you. So when we cross, like when we're doing this crosswind, we're not going to be 90, we're going to be angled well into the wind when we're doing that. That could be a little bit disorienting also at night or in the haze where you really don't have a really great look at the runway. You really got to be paying attention. All right, there's my countdown, 26, 25, 24. And we're doing 70 knots now. I've added a little bit more airspeed. I've got us up to almost 100 now. None of which is enough engine to make any heat. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, coming up. Okay, 5, 3, 2, 1, and it's going to jerk into the turn. There we go. And we are midfield. Now let's see where it turns out, how long it takes it to figure out that it's not going to be able to actually turn a full 90 degrees. Now we can zoom in on this a little bit because that's the interesting part. You might be able to see that. I need I don't know, better camera, but the newer cameras have higher resolution, but they don't have the same audio and power inputs as this one, so they don't work out as well for me. All right, so there's our correction. So you can see the course and our correction. Our correction is, it's about 12 degrees. Am I reading that right? Oh, it's 22 degrees. Yeah, it's more than 20 degree correction. But it's holding it quite well. It's right on it. You can see that over here. It's going to trail along on that. Yeah, oh, you can't see it, but it's taunting you. So I'm going to hold off on losing my altitude until I get out here. First of all, because I don't want to descend into left downwind traffic. That would be silly. Defeat the purpose entirely. Defeating the purpose is also called beating the dolphin. I'm going to get out here to where it starts the teardrop, because the other way, or the other reason to do that, is the airplane's going to want to descend anyway. So it just seems like a little easier to manage if the airplane wants to come down anyway. I don't have to pull back as much throttle, and that presumably gives me a little bit of heat. I have no actual, that's anecdotal at best. I have no real world evidence of that. The thing just doesn't make much heat. I could cover up the radiator a little bit, as I said. The problem, Ohio, it used to get cold and stay cold. Ohio now in the winter, you can have 50, 60 degree days, and then if I don't remember to pull that tape off the radiator, I all of a sudden have an overheating problem. What are you going to do? So, yeah, cylinder heads are only 155 and 160. That's the bottom of the green. So, what are you going to do? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and dial in my altitude because I can do that ahead of time and be ready. So we're going to have 2100. All right, there we go. And I couldn't do that while I was still coming down, or down to the 2600, because it would have just blown right on through it. You have to wait for it to level off, tell you that it's holding altitude before you change it again. And we can, I think we'll keep, well, we can keep our 90 through here, or we can get down to 80, because I'm going to want 80 on downwind. All right, here's our turn. It's going to start now, presumably. So I'm going to say down. And vertical speed 500 is not what I want. Let's keep that at a much more sedate rate of about 200. We don't want to be doing minor aerobatics out here in the haze and in the dark. All right, got to slow her down a little bit. We're up about 90. We definitely want to be at least 90, no more than that. But at least as low as 90. There we go. Now, yeah, any heat I had just became air conditioning. I thought with the radiator it wouldn't cool off as fast as like an exhaust stack would, but I'm wrong. I was very, very wrong on that. Now it's really struggling to make this turn. It's just, we're doing a whole lot of, because we're down to 55 knots across the ground. So it's going to take a while, and then all of a sudden it's going to just suddenly increase, and it probably want to, well, it's bank limited. The autopilot will only go as far, well, it's actually correcting to the left. The autopilot will only go as far as I will allow it to go, which I believe I have set at 30 degrees. I could probably look in the settings, but now would not be the time. So it's going to struggle with this first part, and then all of a sudden, whoop, and it's why you learn turns about a point. In your private, you're like, why am I learning this? Well, you need to understand the bank angle is going to change throughout a circle, and you need to be ready for it to maintain a desired ground track. Now we're getting a good look at the prison. Nobody out walking today. That must suck. That's got to suck for the prisoners, you know, not being able to get out and walk around because it's just too damn cold. I mean, I know I get that way in the house when I have the grand boys over and I have to stay in the house in case they start crying or whatever they do. I just got to get outside, and it's too cold. I've got a stroller for them. I went and bought a used stroller, but it's just too cold for them. So I get just cabin fever, and almost literally. Plus I'm wearing a mask. I'm wearing a mask the whole time they're there, and that just within about 3 hours, that gives me a headache, and it's an aspirin-proof headache, as it turns out. All right, so what are we doing? We're 2,100 feet. We got 40 more to go at 2,100. So I cannot yet adjust my. There it is. Now it's flashing out 2,100, which means it's done with that number, and I can now take another 500 off of that, put it down to 1,600. And that's what we'll do when we're beaming the numbers.
Altitude.
So I see the airport. We're 2 miles out, about 1.5. So I'm going to call it midfield entry. Now this is going to be interesting if it hits midfield. Well, of course, midfield is kind of, yeah, it might do it. We're scooting right along now. Our ground speed now is 106 knots for 82 on the speedometer.
Madison County traffic, 4 Delta Golf is entering the 45 midfield, left downwind runway 27, Madison County.
Nobody around, and they would definitely be coming from that direction. Nobody's landing on 9 today. Looks like a direct crosswind down there, so this could get exciting.
Yeah, the winds here at Madison County showing 250 at 15
good.
gusts of 20. Copy, thank you.
I was just asking myself that. So that's a bit much. It's 20 degrees off, so we'll either make a landing or we won't. This wasn't about landing practice, well, per se. So now we're going to want to get down to our 70. We're going to want to slow down because we're really, really scooting along now. We got 80 and 103 as a comparison. We're beaming the numbers. I'm going to go ahead and say come down. And again, I always have to adjust the vertical speed from my default of 500, and we're going to keep that pretty damn low. We got that at minus 200 again. And now I want my 70 knots, and I can get my flaps down. Now the problem with this, when I put my flaps down, it causes the airplane to bank to the left, and if I do it quickly, it's a really sharp bank. So I have to ease those flaps down when I have the autopilot on it, because we have very, very gentle and give it time to adjust to it. All right.
Madison County traffic, 4 Delta Golf, left base 27, Madison County.
All right, so there's 70. We want 70. We're going to get to 60 on our downwind, although it's going to feel glacially slow with this headwind. It's only a 20-degree crosswind, so that's not that big of a deal to correct for. So you see, it's really not going to get a chance to go wings level, which means I can't look out there for incoming traffic, which is a little unfortunate. I could use, there it is. I could use control wheel steering for that, but I just angle over and then put it back. But yeah. All right, so we're way high. So we need to turn off the autopilot at this point, and
Autopilot.
that's the autopilot gone, and now I am in control. No,
Middletown
there we
traffic.
go. Gotta make sure it turns
Victor
off.
Echo on downwind for 23 Middletown.
Because for whatever reason, it did not disengage on the first time I pushed the button. That's kind of weird. And so we're going to slip a little bit. We got a little bit of wind, so I'm probably not going to need to get down a whole lot of fast. But we got to get down. We do have to get down. So I don't know. I don't think we actually had gotten down to 1,600 feet yet. So maybe I should have been a little more aggressive on the vertical speed. But that's okay. At this point, presumably, we see the runway. We're half a mile, right? Or at most, we're a mile. If I can't see it at a mile, I really shouldn't be out flying anyway.
Approaching waypoint.
All right, I'm going to get my crosswind crab in there and get my wing down to compensate for that. And our ground speed is 45 knots. We could be riding a bicycle that fast. Well, I could. because I can't stand the seats on modern bicycles. I'd rather see a proctologist. That's pretty much the same thing. Alrighty, here we go. We gotta pay attention to this now. Alright, we're gonna keep that crab in, keeping that crab in. Watching our altitude, watching our attitude. There's not too much wind right here. We are barely moving. We are doing 40 knots. There's a greaser of a landing. And we want to get those flaps up, and we're going to hold that nose wheel up, and we're going to keep that left aileron because we're going to jump right back into that wind. And here we go. A little bit of stall warning. Hello to you too. All right, and that completes this. I'm going to hand fly back because it's good practice. Thanks for riding along. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something. Talk to you later. Bye.